big picture, you think about this case, George, you read through it. In your opinion, how strong, George, is the government's case here, in your opinion?
I think it's an uphill battle for the government. That's already been signaled a bit by the judge. They've got battles on a number of fronts. What's the market? The biggest question, what's the market? What does Facebook compete with? But the conduct that Facebook's accused of it's quite different from the other big monopoly cases.
Well, so can you give us a little background on some of these other big monopoly cases? Because and again, I'm not the lawyer you are, but they really haven't produced a lot for the government.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, the government sued Microsoft successfully. Now, did they get much? No, not much. We'll see what they get against Google. But the big difference is in the other monopoly cases, there were dead bodies. In Google, it was Netscape. Microsoft was Netscape. They tried to kill off Netscape. In Google, it's other search engines. There are no dead bodies here. There are no competitors saying that Facebook squeezed us out of the market. Instead, Facebook bought up the potential competitors. So that makes it quite different than the other big monopoly cases.
Do you think there's a chance that they'd actually have to separate Facebook from Instagram, from WhatsApp, and all of a sudden there'd be three separate companies in the same way that years ago AT&T split up into 7 Baby Bells?
Well, of course, the government has to win first. And then the question is, what's the remedy? The case is so narrowly focused. Again, unlike other big cases where there's all sorts of conduct involved, the case is really limited to those acquisitions. And so the natural remedy, if you believe that those acquisitions really did matter, that they really preserved Facebook's dominance, the natural remedy is to do something about it. Spin off companies which can become alternatives to Facebook. There isn't really much short of that can be done. So if the government's successful, I expect that the judge will be amenable to something like that.
George, let me ask you, Meta in a statement to the press says this: more than 10 years after the FTC reviewed and cleared acquisitions, the commission's actions in this case sends the message that no deal is ever truly final. What do you make of that statement, George?
Well, it does send that message, and there's something to that message. There's nothing in the law which says the government can't go back and look at an acquisition that happened 10 years ago and say, now with the wisdom of hindsight, we realize that acquisition was anti-competitive or has become anti-competitive. That doesn't mean the judge might not say that there's something unfair about that. You cleared the acquisition and there's something inappropriate about then 10 years later going back. But there's nothing in the law as it stands now, nothing in the statute which prevents the government from going back, as they did in 1950 in the DuPont General Motors case. Who went back and said the acquisition by DuPont of General Motors 50 years ago we now think was anti-competitive. And they basically forced DuPont to sell off General Motors.
George, let's just pull on a string here, as implausible as it might sound. What if the new FTC leadership were to come together with the new Justice Department leadership and effectively say, you know what, this case doesn't have merit? Have you ever seen a situation where, because of such a radical change from one administration to the next, where a case like this ends up getting pulled? I don't even know if that's the right set of words to apply here.
Well, certainly it wouldn't involve any discussion between the FTC and the DOJ. This is an FTC case. It may involve a discussion between the FTC and the administration. That is to say, if Chair Ferguson might well have a conversation with the administration. The biggest example is the IBM case, which was filed under the Johnson administration. And eventually, now some years later, after a trial, the government unilaterally dropped the case. Now, there's a lot more background. People had decided that case wasn't really as good as it looked when the government filed it. But that is an example where the government unilaterally dropped a case sometime after it was filed by a previous administration.
George, finally here, reportedly, George, Mark Zuckerberg has been lobbying Trump, to intercede, step in, and settle the case. I'm curious, George, in your opinion, how likely is that Trump would step in here, even at this stage?
It's uncharted water. In the past, it hasn't happened. Very rarely. It's very rare for a president to intervene on antitrust matters. But this is uncharted waters. I can't tell you what this president will do today. So it can happen. I don't think there's any love lost between Trump and Zuckerberg, and so that might affect the process. But it's certainly possible that he will direct the FTC to drop the case, it puts Chair Ferguson in a tough place, because Chair Ferguson has basically sent his team into battle and has basically backed his team and said, we think we have a good case. So it would put him in a very embarrassing situation if that happened.
George, great to see you today. Appreciate your time and your insight, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yahoo Finance's very own Alexis Keenan. Alexis.
Yeah, so already up on the stand today, first witness out of the box for the FTC, CEO Mark Zuckerberg. So he's testifying right now. We don't know so much yet about what he's been saying, but he has been asked about network effects. So the fact that buying up Instagram, WhatsApp, and other social media companies helps drive Facebook then's bottom line, of course, now owned by Meta. Now, the FTC in this case, it says that Facebook bought these companies in order to monopolize the market that they're calling personal social networking. They say that they used it to block rivals and that they harm competition. Meta, on the other hand, says, no, we don't even have a monopoly in social media or the personal social networking market. They say that the FTC's market definition, their baseline, that they've got it all wrong. It's flawed. They say that take a look at the different companies, the social media companies that the FTC is including in the market. So the FTC says included is Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, and another LA-based social media company called MeWe. Now, not included, importantly, is if you're arguing for Meta, is LinkedIn, YouTube, Reddit, X, and TikTok. So TikTok, it launched in 2016, and Meta's up there arguing, certainly in their opening statement, saying you got to include these other social media companies in this market, otherwise it just doesn't work, FTC. So the judge in this case has acknowledged that this is an uphill battle for the FTC. I saw some tweets coming out from Meta's comms executive, Andy Stone, tweeting from the courtroom. Part of the opening statement, he was saying that for every single one of the many activities offered on Meta's apps, that it faces vigorous competition, he said. He said, we all compete for time in this market. Another graphic went up too during these statements showing that when the TikTok ban went into effect, very briefly, right, in January, under the executive order from President Biden, that showed that traffic then flowed into Instagram, Facebook, and other social media and off of TikTok. So that's a central part of Meta's argument here.
Reportedly, Alexis, from what I understand, Zuckerberg has been actually lobbying Trump here, right?
Yes.
We'd like the president to step in, intercede, settle this case. When you talk to folks, does that come up, like whether that's at all likelihood that the president will actually step in, even at this stage of the case?
Yeah, in this case,
Yeah.
yes. You know, and a lot of things we say are first when it comes to Trump 2.0, I should say. The antitrust lawyers say it would almost be irresponsible, perhaps, for Mark Zuckerberg to not make these overtures because Wall Street might say, well, why aren't you doing it? You need to curry favor with the president because this is how it works. You had the FTC chair, Andrew Ferguson, saying that he's kind of deferring to Trump, and that's also unusual, right? The FTC is usually thought as an independent body. So, yeah, it might be looked at like you're not doing your job, CEO.
Yeah, I totally agree with Meta. And I am long Meta shares, right? So perhaps I have a vested interest. But, you know, when you think about it, to not include LinkedIn or TikTok as social media competitors, I think it's absurd. I think the only reason this thing is at trial right now is because the FTC used to be headed by Lida Khan, and she wanted to go after anything that was big and techie because that's where the money is. I am shocked that the new FTC commissioners didn't drop the case. I don't think there's a case here.
Well, you have to look back, though. This case was originally investigated and brought under Trump 1.0. It was a 2020 case.
And it took him 5 years.
It took him a long time.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and also Meta has made the point that the environment for social media competition has changed so dramatically, as Google has said in its case, because of AI, right? So you inject that into these platforms, and everything now, 5-6 years later, looks so different.
If Meta loses, Alexis, could Trump step in and tell these commissioners, hey, let's get a deal done, let's settle this thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly a deal can be made post-verdict even. So, and in this case, this is a judge decision. This is not a jury trial. But yes, all the way up until, I guess, the fat lady sings. Yeah.
All right, Alexis, thank you for helping us walk through it. Complex stuff. Appreciate it.